Hello and welcome to the Sana Psychological Podcast, your safe space for connection, healing, and growth. Each episode, our experienced clinicians and special guests will share strategies, stories, and resources to support your unique path to well-being. Because at Sana, your mental health matters. Podcast. I'm your host, Paige Abbott. In our last episode entitled Why We Do the Things We Do, we explored learning theory, reinforcement, and the psychology of habits. We discussed how our behaviors are shaped by experience and how repeated actions become automatic patterns that guide much of our daily lives. Today's episode tackles a related and equally important question. If habits shape our lives, can we change them? Can we become healthier, more disciplined, more confident, more productive, or more resilient? Can someone who has spent years procrastinating become someone who takes action? Can an anxious person become calmer? The answer, according to modern psychology and neuroscience, is a resounding yes, but perhaps not for the reasons most people think. Today, we're going to explore the science of behavioral change, the remarkable adaptability of the human brain, and what research tells us about creating changes that actually last. So let's get right into it. Many people believe that lasting change is primarily a matter of willpower, meaning if you want something badly enough, you'll do it. And if you don't do it, you must not want it enough. It's a simple sounding explanation, but it's an incomplete explanation. Let's think more about how often people make sincere commitments. They decide to exercise, eat better, save money, spend less time on social media. And yet, a mere few weeks later, even days or hours, many find themselves back where they started. So the problem isn't a lack of desire. It's a misunderstanding of how behavior, reinforcement, and learning works. The reality is that our behavior is influenced by systems, environments, habits, emotions, rewards, and biological processes that operate largely outside of our conscious awareness. So change is less about winning a battle against yourself and more about redesigning the conditions that shape our actions. In other words, successful change isn't about becoming a different person overnight. It's about creating circumstances that allow different behaviors to emerge repeatedly. And repetition is where the brain enters the story. For much of history, science believed that the adult brain was largely fixed, that once you reached adulthood, your brain was thought to be relatively permanent. We now know that that's not true. Our brains possess an extraordinary ability called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity refers to the brain's capacity to reorganize itself by forming, strengthening, weakening, and modifying neural connections throughout our whole life. Put simply, your brain changes in response to what you repeatedly do. Every thought, every skill, every habit, every behavior leaves a mark. Neurons that fire together tend to strengthen their connections. There's an old expression, neurons that fire together, wire together. The more often a pathway is used, the more efficient it becomes. Imagine walking through a grassy field. The first trip requires effort. There's no clear path. But if you walk the same route every day, a trail begins to appear. Eventually, the path becomes obvious and easy to follow. Our brain works similarly. Repeated behaviors create those well-worn neural pathways. This is why habits eventually feel automatic. We don't even think about that path that we're following because there don't feel like there are other options. And it's just clear that when we walk into that field, that's the path that we follow. New paths can be created, though, and old paths can weaken. So the brain has that remarkable ability to be adaptable throughout life. No matter your age, your experiences continue shaping the architecture of the mind. So if the brain is so adaptable, why is change often so difficult? The answer lies in efficiency. Your brain is constantly trying to conserve energy. Once it identifies a behavior that reliably achieves a goal, it automates it. Habits save mental effort. They're like the cheat sheets for our brain. You don't have to think through every action. The downside is that those unwanted habits can become deeply ingrained. And as we talked about last episode, I explained why they can also become quite quickly ingrained, even more so than the healthy habits that we want to engage in. Importantly, many researchers believe that habits are rarely erased completely. So instead, new habits are layered over old ones. Think of an old hiking trail in the forest. Even if you stop using it, traces will still remain. The vegetation may slowly return, but the root once existed. Similarly, old behavior patterns can reemerge, especially under stress, fatigue, or emotional pressure. This is why a lot of times people return to old behavior even years after changing them. Not because they failed, not because the change wasn't real, not because they didn't want to stay on the new path, but because the original pathways still existed. Lasting change is often less about deleting old habits and more about strengthening new ones until they become the preferred route. One of the most powerful discoveries in behavior change involves identity. Many people focus on the outcomes. I want to run a marathon. I want to write a book. And while these goals are useful, they do focus solely on results. Long term change often occurs when people shift their identity. Instead of asking, what do I want to achieve? They begin by asking, who do I want to become? So that then it shifts from, I want to run that marathon into, I want to be a person who exercises regularly. I that person who wants to write a book. Instead, it becomes, I want to be a person who follows through on commitments, a person who manages stress effectively. Each time you perform a behavior, it's almost like you're casting a vote for that particular identity. One workout obviously doesn't make you an athlete. One healthy meal doesn't make you healthy, but repeated actions accumulate evidence. And over time, our self concept changes. And once behaviors align with identity, maintaining change becomes significantly easier. People naturally act in ways that are consistent with who they believe they are. When people decide to change, they often aim too high. They try to transform everything at once. Whole new diet, whole new exercise routine, whole new productivity system, whole new sleep schedule, all beginning Monday or tomorrow or at the start of the new year. The enthusiasm is great, but the strategy is often flawed. The brain learns through repetition, not dramatic declarations. Small behaviors repeated consistently tend to outperform ambitious behaviors performed briefly. 5 minutes of exercise per day can be more transformative than 2 hours once a month. That 5 minutes once a day is also more likely to lead to the cueing, the repetition, the behaviors that become part of habits being formed, because repetition is what rewires the brain. So the goal during the early stages of change isn't actually about maximizing performance or making huge movement towards our goal. It's actually just about maximizing consistency and trying to build the habit itself so that it becomes more automatic and we don't have to think as much about it. Success creates momentum, momentum creates confidence, confidence encourages repetition, and repetition drives that neuroplastic change. Here's an uncomfortable truth for us to think about with habits and behavior change. Many of our choices are heavily influenced by our surroundings and by our environment. We often think we're making independent decisions, but in reality, our environment is constantly nudging us. If unhealthy food is visible, we're more likely to eat it. If our phone is beside us, we're more likely to check it. If we're around a bunch of people who are consuming alcohol, we're more likely to drink too. Behavior is often a product of what is easiest, what's available, and also what's familiar. So this does mean that one of the more effective ways to change behavior is to look at making changes to our environment. Make healthier habits easier, more accessible. If you want to read more, leave a book on your pillow. If you want to spend less time online, move distracting apps off your home screen. Have a phone bowl where you leave your phone and you don't even see it. You don't look at it. If you want to exercise, lay out your workout clothes the night before. Rather than relying on motivation in the moment, start designing conditions that make the desired behavior the path of least resistance. The less friction there is, the more likely a behavior becomes. Now, let's also touch on something that almost every behavior change journey includes: a sense of failure. The missed workouts, the broken streaks, the bad days, the relapses, the moments of frustration. Most people interpret these events as evidence that change isn't working, but behavioral science suggests something different. Mistakes are not the opposite of change, they're actually part of the process. Learning is very rarely linear. Progress tends to look quite messy. People improve, they slip backwards, they recover, they improve again, and on we go. What matters most isn't that it's a constant straight line of progress. It's our recovery. It's how we deal with things. Research consistently shows that people who successfully maintain long term changes aren't necessarily those who never fail. They're the ones who return to the desired behavior as quickly as they can after those setbacks. So, getting right back into the new habits, the new behaviors that they want to be forming, those are the people that their success tends to build because they're right back towards that kind of congealing of identity. Their actions are meeting who they want to be and how they see themselves. So successful changers don't avoid mistakes, they recover from them and they get back into things as quickly as possible. There's one final idea worth considering. Every behavior is shaping a future version of you. Not dramatically, not instantly, but gradually. That means that every action strengthens certain neural pathways. Every repetition teaches the brain something. Every habit contributes to the person you're becoming. This can feel intimidating, but I want you to also remember it's empowering because it means that change isn't reserved for extraordinary circumstances. It's not dependent on things being ideal or after a dramatic breakthrough. Change is actually happening all the time. The question that we need to be considering is, in what direction is that change happening? So the challenge is learning to guide that adaptation intentionally so that the change happens to go in the direction that we want it to go, rather than just letting random circumstances start to steer us in directions that we don't want to go. This ultimately is the foundation of what I talk about with people every day as a therapist, is how do we identify where we've got to and how do we start creating that subtle infrastructure of change so that we can start to move in the directions that we want to. It's really fascinating stuff. It's exciting, it's hopeful. And what I love about it is that it's quite simple in that it doesn't make big asks of us. And that's what I love about the real change process, is that we can do it bit by bit, subtly. We don't have to do the dramatic, the big, but we just need to keep making those small bits of investment in ourselves and in the change process. I hope that this episode was helpful for you. I really love talking about this aspect of learning and habit change. I find it really fascinating. I think it's so applicable to all of our lives. And for anybody who's really on that mental health and personal development journey, this stuff is essential from my perspective to understand and to really start to bring in and implement in our day-to-day lives. I hope that you'll also check out our previous episode, which talks more about the learning theory that's fundamental to all of this. Understanding that a little bit better can really help you make more informed changes and just be more compassionate and more understanding with yourself along the way. Thank you so much for being here and can't wait to talk to you next time. Thank you for listening to the Sana Psychological Podcast. We're glad you joined us today. For more resources, free tools, or to book a session with our team, visit sanapsychological.com. Your mental health is our priority. Until next time, be gentle with yourself and take good care.